So mindfulness practices are meant to be practiced alongside a moral and ethical life. Not necessarily for the sake of being moral, but because Buddhism acknowledges that it's much more practical to be loving, compassionate, and conducive for the well-being of society than not to be. In other words, it's much more practical to be a good person than to be an ass and like being mean to people and stuff. Another concept that is very important to mindfulness is the idea that we are not our minds, but that we have a mind. That we are what observes and experiences the mind, but we're not it. Just in the same way, we have clothes and possessions, but we are not them. So another concept is the self or no self. And following the same train of thought that we are not our minds, Buddhism goes one step further by stating that there isn't really a self inside of us. The self is just a fleeting compound of thoughts, memories, and feelings, but there is not a self to be found. This is one of the most difficult Buddhist concepts to grasp and can really only be experienced, not really explained. So we will be doing some practices later on to feel that and have the inner experience of what they mean by this. The way this concept of no self is used in mindfulness therapy is by introducing the concept to the client so the fixation on oneself can be transcended. Transcended by realizing that there is no I other than awareness itself. This concept of no self is in stark contrast to the more prevalent individualism that permeates most of psychotherapy. And this concept of no self is also very important for neuroscience, and neuroscience keeps on doing more and more research and realizing how there is not such a thing as a self. They're getting to the same thing as Buddhism is getting, that the only thing there is awareness, and awareness is observing everything that is, or the lower self. In Buddhism it's also called the higher self, which is, in spirituality we also talk of the higher self or awareness, and then the little self, the ego mind, the emotions and feelings that are fleeting and they cannot really be pinpointed at exactly because they're always changing. So this concept of us having a mind but not being one, of being awareness, is central to the practice of Buddhism and mindfulness, and it can be better illustrated by this image. In mindfulness practice, we are the sky, awareness, and the mind, ideas, memories, and emotions are the weather. The sky is always there, regardless of how cloudy or sunny the weather is, and the sky allows all weather to be as it is. The sky does not say, "Oh no, you cannot come right now, dear storm, you were scheduled for next week," or "Enough snow, why do you keep on coming, you're so annoying, snow." The sky lets all weather be as it is. The sky knows that weather is going to pass and go, and it's not going to be there forever. A cloud is not going to be there forever. So the principal or archetypical mindfulness practice is to be like the sky and letting all thoughts and feelings come, arise, and let go. Well, we stay with them, but we do not cling to them or reject them. We just let them be. Connected to the main mindfulness technique and to the second noble truth is the concept of impermanence. The idea that everything passes away, nothing lasts forever, which is one of the reasons in mindfulness therapy that we can be certain that any so-called negativity will eventually go away. It will not last forever, and it cannot last forever. Another concept that we've discussed in our videos before is the concept that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain, whether physical or psychological, is meant to arise in the life of a human, but suffering is caused by our secondary emotions, by thinking of what happened to us, by identifying with the weather. For instance, if a soccer player has a knee injury, he will feel physiological pain, but suffering will come if then he or she starts thinking, "Oh my God, my career is over, I will never be able to play, I'm a failure," and so on and so forth. All this self-induced suffering can be bypassed by simply practicing the principal archetypical mindfulness technique. And I think this is the right moment to talk about what mindfulness prescribes when dealing with negativity. With the background knowledge that we are not our thoughts, mindfulness prescribes to simply let the negativity be as it is, not to try to manipulate it, nor change it, nor divert it, or diffuse it. So mindfulness prescribes to simply let the negativity be as it is, not to try to manipulate it, nor change it, nor divert it, or diffuse it. Simply to stay with it. Explore it and observe how it withers away. The only other guideline when letting be is to not believe what the mind is telling us. What this means is that when following our sky analogy, the weather, which is called the primary emotion idea, arises in consciousness, no matter how horrific or negative it is okay. It's alright. The problem comes when we try to react to this thought pattern. For instance, the thought of I want to murder my neighbor arises, which is a primary emotion idea. Then we will be aware of such a thought, aware of the feeling it comes with, and we will completely let the feeling be. We do not entertain the feeling or then tell ourselves things such as, I'm such a horrible person, how can I think that, blah blah blah. We just let the mind be and wait for the emotion idea to subside. That is what mindfulness advises, to let the mind be and do its job, and whenever it throws negativity at us, we acknowledge the negativity and we let it be, knowing that it will go away. Sometimes sooner, sometimes later. But it will go away. This archetypical mindfulness technique, which gives name to this psychological approach, can be roughly summarized in a sentence. Mindfulness is an attitude of awareness of the present experience with acceptance. So how do people develop into what they are according to mindfulness? As we have previously discussed, people develop into what they are depending on how close or far they are to mindfulness and Buddhism's core concepts. The closer they are to acceptance, awareness, ethical behavior, and the heartfelt sense of impermanence, the healthier they will be psychologically. Problems arise the further people stray from these concepts. This building up of the personality starts very early in life. The earlier we become aware that we are not our minds, the closest we will be to psychological health. And that's the way mindfulness describes the way humans become what they are. So according to mindfulness, how do people change for the better? So mindfulness says that by cultivating acceptance and awareness of one's own life and experiences, in other words, by following the Fourth Noble Truth and the Eightfold Path, following the mindfulness framework, leads people to realize that they are not their minds and to show compassion to their minds whenever they are showing us negativity. Mindfulness also shows clients that they have the control to engage in thinking or not. They do not have the control on the primary emotion idea, but they do have control over the subsequent thoughts. And what are the specific technical interventions that follow from mindfulness? The same way we use heuristic for most of things in our daily lives, when people hear the term mindfulness, they tend to associate it with mindfulness meditation practices. Even though mindfulness, as we have seen and been discussing, is a whole new restructuring of how we interact with ourselves and with the world. Having said that, we'll be discussing these types of meditation practices on our next video.